Hey, welcome to another writing live stream that I'm doing. I'm Bryan Young. I'm the author of a bunch of books, and I write for Big Shiny Robot and StarWars.com. And if you're here, you probably know all that already. So the things we're going to be talking about today, we got a question last week about rules of magic, and the idea is, do you have to have rules for magic? Because that's sort of the conventional wisdom these days. And I think Brandon Sanderson sort of addressed this in his the online videos of his class on writing sci-fi and fantasy. And if you haven't watched those, if you just look up Brandon Sanderson fantasy class, you should definitely go check those out, because I mean they just recorded his entire class. But he was of the belief for a while that you have to have rules for your magic system. In that, and if you look at his work, like look at Mistborn, and the magic system is very regimented, where there's very specific rules about the sorts of metals that create certain effects and how that works, and what happens if you're trying to burn metals that aren't the metals that cause the magic, and it's very regimented, and it's fascinating and it's fun to read. But if you look at some of the other examples of magic where, like Lord of the Rings, right? The magic system kind of comes just at a cost of story. So when Gandalf stops the Balrog, we don't really know what goes into the magic that we don't know what goes into the magic that Gandalf uses to perform that feat, but it comes at such a high cost that it works for the story. And there are little bits of incidental magic he uses over the course of the books, where he's like lighting lights and things like that. So I think, no, you don't have to have a rules for magic. Necessarily, as long as it fits with the story and it's consistent. It's easier to stay consistent if you have rules, but you don't, even if you do have rules, you don't necessarily want to put those in the in the book either. Maybe that's just something you want to keep for yourself, and by keeping that for yourself, you know what the limitations are, so you can keep it consistent through the course of the book, but you don't necessarily need to bog down your reader with what all those rules are. And they can be relatively simple too, but it's something that you need to pay attention to, make consistent, and not break once you've established those. But I don't necessarily think that they're absolutely necessary. I think that they're optional if that's the kind of story you want to tell, but they can help you in telling the story if you have them. So the next question we got was about, and if you have any questions, go ahead and write them in the comments section here. And if you're watching this live, I'll try to answer them during this session. And if you're watching later, maybe I'll try to get to them in a future installment of this. But I was asked, what is the best way to write a character of the opposite sex? And this is something I honestly struggled with for a long time. Because just sort of we in society are told, like, well, for me as a male author, or just as a male, that women are this unknowable other. And women aren't that. And it took a long time for me to, like, come to that realization. When I was working on my second book, Operation Montauk, there was a character who I'd written as male, and I had one of my female beta readers read it, and they were just like, where are all the women? There's not enough women in this. And I kind of read the book again and identified a character where the gender didn't actually matter. There wasn't anything inherently male about the character. And so I changed the pronouns. I made the captain of the ship, of the spaceship in Operation Montauk, I changed him to a her. I didn't even need to change their last name. So Captain Valentine in that started as a man, finished as a woman, and people kind of told me like, "Hey, that was my favorite character. She was great. You really captured the essence of what that was." And what that taught me was that trying to think about the opposite sex as something other than that they're just another person uh, is not it's not helpful, right? Because what you need to do is you need to get into the head of another character anyway and imagine what their experience is like. And it doesn't matter if they're male or female, they're a character, because males that I write aren't like me, and have no problem getting into their heads. What would make a female any different? They have largely the same experiences that I do. I mean, they have a lot of different experiences, and they certainly are exposed to different things than I am, but so is any other person. Like the things that make up Bryan are different than those that make up anyone. And so if you're going to be writing and getting into someone else's head anyway, what difference does the sex make for the character? It's just you just need to get into their mindset one way or the other, and the gender doesn't matter as much. And so once I sort of figured that out, it became no problem writing women, because I pushed past that stigma that they should be hard. They're not. Women typically are not that different, and have the same thoughts and feelings we do. And that was borne out when I literally just had to change the pronouns of that character, and then had women read it and say, "Wow, this was perfect. We didn't even we really loved that character, and there were no issues whatsoever." So that's the best way to do it. If there are any questions in the comments, I'll happily take those. If not, a bit of an announcement in case you guys hadn't seen on my blog, the Star Wars, the Best of Star Wars Insider Volume 2 is coming out in just a couple weeks, and that is a sort of a compendium of some of the best articles in Star Wars Insider, and I was asked to write introductory essays to every piece, so that add context or flavor or personal experiences as part of the pieces. And you can order that on Amazon now, and that would be awesome, because I think I did a lot of, like, all the stories that are in it are really good, so it's like stuff you're going to want to keep on your shelf because it's really great stuff from Star Wars Insider. But I kind of poured my heart and soul into writing all those essays for Star Wars Insider, and it was a lot of fun. It was challenging. It was very challenging in that, and I wrote about this on my blog a little bit. It was challenging in that I had to do 20 or so of these, maybe more, in a very short time frame. And for those of you who know, like, I do this a lot. Like, I've got columns that range from weekly to monthly with City Weekly, and it's really a matter of me pitching a few ideas, coming up with something to say, and then figuring out how I'm going to say it. And, I'll have, a week for this process. Well, with this thing with Star Wars Insider, it took all of the skills that I'd learned in the last 7 or 8 years of writing for newspapers, for weekly newspapers, and condensing it into one after the other, after the other, after the other. And it was a strain on my abilities, but it taught me a lot, and it taught me that I could turn over that much material and think up things to say that had some value at a rate and speed that I wasn't expecting. So it was a really good time. So if there's no more questions, then I'll just say keep writing and visit my website, and be sure to check out my books and review them. Reviews are very important for writers like myself. And keep writing.